China versus the US, Xi versus Trump. Who has the upper hand? And what's that mean for Taiwan, trade and AI? Send me your questions and comments. Chinese affairs expert Clifford Coonan can answer them. He lived in and reported from China for 15 years. Rick Glowett is our correspondent in Taiwan. The high-tech island is a diplomatic hot potato for anyone doing business with China, let alone their biggest economic and political rival, the United States. Well, the stakes couldn't be higher. Some analysts say the meetings in Beijing could be a watershed moment. One user, the Empire Master, says China's smart. They know they can get everything from Trump if they just put on a little show. We'll take you to the banquets and tours and kids waving flags in a moment. A lot of people are writing, "Keep Trump in China, please." I think awkward sums up the situation, and we're watching Xi Jinping greeting Donald Trump there today on the steps outside the Great Hall of the People on the western side of Tiananmen Square. If we can bring up that video again, I'd like to walk you through it because it was a long handshake that we saw. Clifford's going to chime in a moment. It was a little pat from Trump that we saw. Let's play that video, please. Trump talking a little bit, Xi not saying that much. There's that pat from Trump, and not too sure what Trump is saying there, not too sure if Xi understands what he's saying, another pat there. What do you think about the body language, Clifford?
Well, it's, as you say, it's very awkward. I mean, awkwardness is not unusual in these meetings, particularly with Xi Jinping. He's a very reserved figure. He moves very slowly. He moves very little. He's not in any way dynamic in that sense. No. Trump did say in the run-up that he was going to give him a big fat hug, and this was. A lot of people are saying that's just not going to happen. and I can't think of any examples, really. I mean, he does have warm relations with a lot of other, particularly authoritarian leaders. But in terms of the hug, the only person who I can recall getting this was Putin. And he's the alliance with Putin and supposedly the personal connection with Putin is very strong.
And Putin is expected next week. Last week, we had the Iranian Foreign Minister, Araghchi, so lots of high-level visits right now, and everyone's watching the body language, but not everyone's allowed to touch Xi. I mean, there are strict protocols in place, aren't there?
That's right. I mean, as I say, he's very reserved, and also it's meant to. It's about projecting this sort of strength, this that he's kind of above it all, and the idea of familiarity in some ways undermines this. It's almost a bit like the imperial model. I mean, and you do see a lot of parallels between the Chinese imperial times and the rule of the Communist Party. So it is sort of almost imperial the way he's not allowed to be touched.
Well, let's listen in to what US President Donald Trump had to say about his friendship with Xi Jinping and their future.
You and I have known each other now for a long time. In fact, the longest relationship of our two countries that any president and president has had. And that's, to me, an honor. We've had a fantastic relationship. We've gotten along. When there were difficulties, we worked it out. I would call you and you would call me. And whenever we had a problem, people don't know, whenever we had a problem, we worked it out very quickly. We're going to have a fantastic future together. Such respect for China, the job you've done. You're a great leader. I say it to everybody, you're a great leader. So I really look very much forward to our discussion. It's a big discussion. There are those that say this is maybe the biggest summit ever. They can never remember anything like it. I can say in the United States, people aren't talking about anything else. But it's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be your friend. And the relationship between China and the USA is going to be better than ever before. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So Trump talking about having such a long relationship, but I mean, the reason he has that long relationship is because China's only had one leader for such a long time, and it looks like a leader for life.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly for the foreseeable future. There's no talk of a successor. It made it so that he can continue going as long as he likes, as long as he decides. So, yeah, but it is true. I mean, they have had a long relationship. And it's been kind of interesting to watch it because in many ways his relationship is at odds with elements within his own government. You know, this is Trump playing the personal card very much, and it's very much within his style.
Well, let's listen in to what Xi is saying and how she frames what he calls a partnership rather than his rival.
The common interests between China and the United States outweigh their differences. The success of both countries is an opportunity for each other, and the stability of China-US relations is a good thing for the world. Both sides benefit from peace, while fighting harms both. We should be partners, not rivals. Achieve mutual success, prosper together, and embark on a new path of great power coexistence in the new era.
Clifford, it sounds like China and the US are carving up the globe to share among each other.
It does, and it's very interesting, this language. I mean, a lot of it is rhetoric, but Xi here is presenting China very much as the US's equal. It has this goal that by 2049 that it will be the dominant power in the world, which would mark 100 years since the foundation of the People's Republic of China. So it's all chimes with that kind of sentiment, that the idea that China is a superpower and that China and the US will be the dominant powers. The background to this as well is a narrative within China coming from the Communist Party that the US is in decline. Obviously, he's not going to mention that in his speeches, but that aspect of it is part of it.
One user is asking, who do you think is the real boss here, Xi or Trump?
Well, I think Trump is coming in weakened into these talks. He's got the Iran war. This visit is hopefully, for him, he will be hoping it will be a distraction from the Iran war, which is expensive and which is seemingly without resolution. Xi Jinping has been very careful to present himself as the dominant figure coming into this. The US is still very powerful, and no one should ever underestimate the power of the US. But certainly Trump has got a lot more on his mind going into this, whereas Xi Jinping has been able to, I mean, there was a line saying that never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. And basically he's just been able to sit there and watch as Trump falls in the polls in the US and as he struggles with Iran and all the other problems that he's facing right now.
He posted on Monday, Trump did, great things will happen for both countries. Rick, if we can bring you in now, could you tell us a bit about how Taiwan was actually brought up in their conversations?
Yeah, well, Xi Jinping has been saying, and other people in Beijing saying, that Taiwan is obviously on the top of the agenda for this meeting. Taiwan, claimed as part of China by the People's Republic of China, by Xi Jinping, has been called the core of core interests. And it was interesting today, you know, that was one of the first bits of information we got from the closed door part of the meeting was from the Chinese state media agency Xinhua, which said that you know, how delicate this issue was. And there was pretty fiery language coming from the Chinese side. Xi Jinping said that it was extremely dangerous and that this could risk sort of a collision, and this could be the thing that gets in the way of the Chinese-US relationship. And this was sort of to be expected. There was a lot of signals beforehand. Some embassies around the world, Chinese embassies, I think the Chinese embassy in US kind of released China's red lines, Taiwan at the top of it. And that is, of course, a big point of contention between the two countries. China claims Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory, whilst Taiwan has a close relationship with the US, relies on kind of some implicit diplomatic backing from the US, and, of course, those weapon sales that it uses to fend off that threat from China.
So can you give us an idea of what was actually discussed and what was possibly agreed, if anything has been agreed upon?
Yeah, so from the Chinese side, we have that readout on how important the Taiwan issue is for China. From the US side, we didn't see that they didn't say anything about Taiwan, but we know that Donald Trump, in the run-up to it, said that he expected it to come up and that specifically he expected to discuss weapons sales. There's sort of two big areas where we believe that the Chinese would be pushing for concessions from the US. One is those weapon sales. The most recent of that was in December last year when the US agreed another $11 billion of weapon sales to Taiwan. That's obviously seen as a really a red line for Beijing. It doesn't like the fact that the US sells weapons to Taiwan. And there's also some really important things about language, about how the US uses diplomatic language in relation to Taiwan. And of course, Beijing would like that to be more in line with how China sees the situation.
OK, but let me bring in a soundbite of the US president before departing on this trip. He compares Russia's invasion of Ukraine to China's Taiwan position. Let's just listen in, Rick.
Taiwan, I equate it a little bit to that. If you have the right president, I don't think it'll happen. I think we'll be fine. I have a very good relationship with President Xi. He knows I don't want that to happen. Very far away, very, very far away. We're distant 9,500 miles. You know, we're 9,500 miles. He's 67 miles. It's a little bit of a difference, but you know, there's a lot of support for Taiwan from Japan and from countries from that area. Do you think?
Rick, is that what Taiwan is really worried about here, that Trump could just start rambling on this trip and agree to something with China over Taiwan that Taiwan certainly is not happy about?
Yeah, that's absolutely Taiwan's worry. The relationship with the US is kind of a patchwork of agreements, things that are said and not said, and it's really delicate. And you'll see that US officials are always really careful about the language that they use around Taiwan. For example, the US acknowledges but not recognises China's claims, and the US, says that it does not support Taiwan independence, but it doesn't say that it opposes it. And of course, so people in Taiwan will be watching, and it's interesting that Donald Trump mentioned in relation to Ukraine, of course, the conflict in Ukraine, Russia's invasion, full-scale invasion of Ukraine has been watched really keenly here. The fact that these big, strong nations can act unilaterally against another and how the world reacts. And of course, the worry is that Taiwan has been existing in a kind of delicate balance between the threat coming from China and the support coming from the US. And, a lot of it is what's called strategic ambiguity. It's what's not said. No one's quite sure how the US would react if China moved to do something unilaterally against Taiwan. And it's that threat that really keeps the status quo, the fact that Taiwan's people here live in a free, democratic country. Taiwan says that it doesn't need to declare independence because it's already an independent country. And this status quo has continued for decades because of this kind of implicit relationship between Taiwan and the US and how that's viewed by China, yeah.
One user writes, China is getting ready to take Taiwan any time now. Another asks, if the US does not recognise Taiwan as a country, would it not be technically arming Chinese rebels? Can you answer that, Rick?
Well, the question of whether it's arming Chinese rebels, that's kind of the Beijing framing. When Beijing hits out at the government here that, like I said, really rejects China's claims over the island and says Taiwan's people should choose their own future and that they're a free democratic country that can decide itself whether it wants to be part of China or not. The phrasing that China uses is stuff like rebels, separatists. Particularly Beijing labels Taiwan's president a dangerous separatist.
A question for you, Clifford, that a user has asked, does it matter if Xi is leader for life? Isn't that better than having 10 bad leaders in a row like in most Western countries?
Well, I suppose it depends about whether you believe that one should choose. The country should choose its leader. The problem, Xi has been very successful and is viewed as being very successful in terms of in China, for what he's achieved. You could also argue that that the lack of, the comparison, say, with other countries that are democratic, which have also performed very well, that it isn't always down to this authoritarian position. So I think it's obviously the big question, and a lot of authoritarians say, well, look at the success of China. This is what happens when you don't have people choosing their leader, when the leader is imposed. But it's a philosophical question.
And it depends who you ask.
Yeah.
Well, let's take you to the Forbidden City for a moment, because reporters wanted to know more about Taiwan. Have a listen in.
How were your talks, sir?
It's great.
Did you talk about Taiwan,
Great place.
Mr. President?
Incredible. China's beautiful.
So, Trump ignoring the question there about whether or not they'd discuss Taiwan, saying China's beautiful. Rick, why is Trump trying to get out of that question right there in that position?
Yeah, well, like I said, the language is really tightly controlled on this sort of thing. He, with one sentence, we know he likes to speak off the cuff, right? With one sentence, he could sort of undo decades of delicate US policy, words that are very thought over through policymakers in Washington over years and tweaked very gently on the State Department website, for example. And I think if Trump spoke out in one sentence, he could, really impact the way that relations between China and Taiwan, and I think he probably knows, or he's been told what's at stake here. One statement from him that lessens or changes how the US sees Taiwan and sees China's claims over Taiwan, that could set a new bottom for Beijing. They would take that as, the new normal. They would use that in other parts of the world, in policy discussions all around the world, to say that, well, this is what the US president said. Taiwan isn't a country. Taiwan is part of China, or whatever he might have said, and it would, really kind of upset this delicate status quo that we have here.
Clifford?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I learned when I was a journalist in China, that Taiwan is the red line. Mm-hmm. You could say whatever you want about human rights or whatever, but if I referred to China as a country, there would be immediate protests. I'd be called into the foreign ministry, or there would be complaints at the embassy. It was a really, it's a red line, and the language is so important, as Rick's been saying.
Okay, we're just looking at live pictures at the moment from Beijing. Another pointer that one viewer had, did Trump just say support from Japan in that shot we listened to, in the soundbite we listened to before? That will certainly just stir up China. Stupid to use Japan as a go-to. I mean, it's really, he's walking on thin ice, isn't he?
Yeah, and obviously Japan has recently expressed strong support for Taiwan, and it's caused all kinds of tensions in the region. So I think what Trump seems to be, that was such an interesting soundbite, the way he seemed to be, first of all, he's sort of holding back when he just said China's great. He said don't say anything about Taiwan. But in the earlier soundbite, then he was also talking about it's very far away. It's a problem for the region. He's trying to kind of, in some ways, he's got enough on his plate right now without getting involved in Taiwan. I mean, maybe that's what's driving that.
So what does Beijing want when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to arms sales and the US?
Well, they want, as Rick's been saying, they want the arms sales to stop. They have a problem with this, or they want the language to change. They want the US to be less ambiguous. They want to get rid of this strategic ambiguity, because that will then give them a framework within which they can take whatever action they want to take on Taiwan, be that an invasion or a blockade. They're looking for that kind of tacit support, I think.
We're just looking at the banquet tables, what's on the menu. I think people are going to be a little more interested on what's on the agenda. When it comes to the language on Taiwan, you were referring to this earlier, Rick, about the US's position of not supporting independence, the Chinese wanting that to be changed to oppose independence. But Rick, I'd like to know what the Taiwanese feel about all of this.
Yeah, well, I think the characterization of Taiwan over the last couple of days is trying to keep their head down. For Taiwan, what's happened today is probably, close to the best outcome that it could have expected, which is just basically to not be on the agenda, to not have Taiwan be talked about, for there not to be new statements from the US. Of course, we've seen like a slightly more harsher tone from China, which isn't great. But the Taiwan government here today is saying that nothing surprising coming from the meeting, and they've been asserting that they've been in constant communication with the US throughout this. Taiwan is, when there are these blips, when there are conversations about US support for Taiwan. Taiwan officials are often very keen to point out that there is kind of bilateral, bipartisan support, especially in the Congress in the US, for Taiwan. And they've also been pointing out today that, Taiwan is not the one threatening the status quo. They've said, picking up something that Xi Jinping said, that if both the US and China really do want peace in the region, then the best thing is for China to stop its military intimidation of Taiwan. So they've also been flagging that it is Beijing that is looking to change the situation here, and again, kind of framing China as the aggressor.
The other thing I should point out is that there aren't only fears about the wording here and what Trump could say, but also Trump's bargaining style. And he does have a whole lot of CEOs with us. This is about business, not just politics. A dozen powerful CEOs have joined him on his trip, including SpaceX and Tesla boss Elon Musk, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, Tim Cook, the outgoing CEO of Apple. We've got pictures of these, so if we could just show the folks some of the CEOs who've joined Trump on this trip. Tim Cook, the outgoing CEO of Apple, is also among them. Rick, do these guys help Trump's cause, or do they complicate things?
Well, it's a really kind of complicated, murky picture, the trade issues between China and the US. And if China hadn't brought the big Taiwan issue to the fore, and if the Iran war wasn't also on the table, then trade would be the main thing that these two superpowers would have to be talking about. Let's not forget that their really big trade war that kicked off last year is still technically a truce, and the measures they put in to take down some of the tariffs and other measures runs out later this year. So they're still kind of working through those. And I guess, this is how Trump does it. He brings a lot of, big figures. He said he wanted to bring the CEOs of these companies. He wanted to bring the top people. And that is part of his agenda that he wants. He wants US businesses to be able to operate more in China, for the Chinese market to be more open, more fair. But, that's just one part of a really big puzzle when it comes to trade between these two big superpowers, and China will want other things in return, and that's probably what's being hashed out in Beijing these few days.
Well, on that point, Clifford, tell us more about the back and forth over the NVIDIA boss joining the journey.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, if you just take a step back from that for a moment, there's that basically Trump, when he was, the backdrop to hit this trip has been that he wants the 5 Bs, which is to sell Boeings, beef, soybeans, and he wants to set up a board of investment and a board of trade, which would manage trade between the two countries and separate it from security issues, which I think is a very important point. But what the Chinese want is they want the 3 Ts. Tariffs, technology, and Taiwan, right? Those are the 3 big topics for them. So if you look at the technology aspect of that, and it's linked to the tariffs as well, Jensen Huang was not included originally in the delegation to go. He came on board late. There was a feeling that AI supremacy is something that the US is very keen to hold on to. China has been making massive advances. So clearly there was some sort of negotiation going on there, and then in the last minute they invited the NVIDIA boss. And tech, this US tech, the tariffs...
there's Elon Musk.
Right, yeah, also with major interests in China with Tesla, and he'd be seeking to boost his interest in China because they're really struggling with competition from domestic e-vehicle manufacturers there.
That's interesting.
So the whole AI thing is absolutely crucial to this, and the tariffs, because China is currently blocked from getting access to many of the top chips, the top AI chips.
Are we expecting to get some sort of answer as far as their trade tiff goes, though?
I don't think so. I think what we'll see, I think what we're going to see is more managed competition. This idea that they will basically keep things as they are, they'll keep extending it. My feeling would be that because Xi Jinping is supposed to be coming to Washington, D.C. later in the year, that they will have a big... That's the kind of thing, you can just sort of see the optics outside the White House, Trump and Xi shaking hands as they announce the end of the trade war.
We can see Rubio there, we can see which boss is that at the very back? NVIDIA, the NVIDIA CEO there at the very back. There's so much at play here. It's not just the optics, of course, the power at play, the global influence. I mean, even just getting it to go along on one of these trips is a huge thing in itself, isn't it? I mean, it means so much to your company, the company's future, your shareholders. There's Rubio, again, the state secretary. It would be really interesting if we could get some audio on some of these conversations. Maybe there are lip readers with us in this chat who could let me know.
It's very reminiscent, you know, of the early 2000s when China had just been admitted to the World Trade Organization, and basically Wall Street and Western German companies, American companies, all the Western companies were flooding China, investing heavily, setting up factories. Obviously, we're not going to see that kind of wave again, but it is interesting that after sort of years now of a much colder relationship between the two countries, you're now seeing that Wall Street is back very much and pushing again, and the big US tech companies are also making waves now.
But we're not going to see a wave of Chinese companies suddenly popping up in the US, are we?
Well, this is one thing that was mooted before, that he would broker some kind of $1 trillion deal for Chinese companies to invest in the US. And this has obviously caused some alarm among the ruling elite in the US because of the massive security risks, and that this is a strategic rival, and you can't suddenly have them investing billions of dollars and gaining control of US companies and so on. So you wouldn't think that it would happen, but there's an unpredictable nature to these trips that when Trump makes them, so it could happen.
We're just looking at live pictures of the banquet being set up there, and diplomats speaking among themselves. One viewer pointed out, does the US not flex its muscle to get countries in line? So what's wrong if China does?
Well, it's a question of, because the US is a democratic nation, and its values align more with Western values. So, and not everyone agrees with the US flexing its muscles. I mean, there's a lot of opposition to Iran doing it. So I guess it's a question of who you would see as your natural allies when you're making these decisions.
Another question on the business front, 90% of rare earths are needed for those chips and US military equipment that come from China. So who needs whom more?
That's a very good point. And the whole strategic aspect of these minerals, that basically when Trump has introduced stronger tariffs, China has been able to reciprocate by lowering the supply of rare earths, and the US has quickly backed down. So it's a very important point.
Rick, could I bring you in again? What's the US-Taiwanese relationship like at the moment, just to change subject?
Yeah, well, there's been kind of like many countries aligned with the US around the world, people that would describe themselves as allies. It's been quite a bumpy ride during this second Trump administration. A lot of Taiwanese were really keen on Trump in his first term because one of the first things he did, which is kind of a big break with protocol, was he accepted a congratulatory call from Taiwan's president. Obviously, that really annoyed Beijing because that's kind of a leader-to-leader. I think he was still, he hadn't yet been sworn in, but that kind of obviously really annoyed China. But that kind of put Trump in Taiwan's good books, if you will, and Trump in his first term oversaw a lot of weapons sales to Taiwan. But obviously we've kind of seen how Trump acts, the kind of strongman, the way he's been dealing with Putin, how he's taken more of Putin's line rather than supporting Ukraine in the way that Biden did. So there's been a lot of anxiety here in Taiwan. And like I said, a lot of the statements from the Taiwanese officials here or people in the US are trying to show that there is like kind of a bedrock of support in the US for Taiwan, that there is a lot of communication between the two sides, and that isn't, all dependent on who's in the executive branch at the time.
Mm-hmm. There's the Defence Minister Hegseth in the background. He's just been obscured by someone's head. If we can return to that banquet in a moment and just bring in pictures from Ukraine that came into us just a few hours ago. Russia hit Ukraine's capital with a mass drone and missile attack early Thursday morning. And Russian leader Vladimir Putin, I pointed out, is expected to visit Beijing days after Trump leaves. Explain to us why Xi and Trump are talking about Ukraine in the first place, Clifford.
Well, they have a very close relationship. I think in some ways Trump's ambiguity, his lukewarm approach to the Russia's invasion of Ukraine is something that China will appreciate. But I imagine that he's also been putting pressure on. It's certainly been a topic for discussion with them, and a lot of it will be to see some kind of resolution because he has been pushing for peace there. It didn't happen on day one of his presidency, I think, as he promised in the campaign, and it's dragging on now. And Xi does have strong influence over Putin. It hasn't really condemned. It's backing Russia in the war in Ukraine with these dual-use weapons, and so it definitely has the leverage with the Chinese that they can bring influence to bear. So I imagine that's what's going to happen next week. On the other hand, next week's visit with Putin is also a sign of who she is also going to show who his real friends are. I mean, this is a very important aspect of it as well. It's also a power play. So it's a very complex situation.
We're just looking at aftermath pictures coming from Kyiv. I believe 3 people have been killed. They're looking for more bodies in the rubble. That war itself dragging on and on. There's another war to talk about here. And Clifford, this would have to be the biggest issue right now, Iran, which we have to point out is a close friend of China's. China is their biggest buyer of energy. It's also the week after Iran's foreign minister visited Beijing. I mean, surely that in itself throws a big spanner into the works.
Absolutely. And China has been critical of the US attack on Iran, the US and Israeli attack on Iran, but it hasn't really done very much, and there's not really very much it can do. It has got these strategic oil reserves that they're going through, although my feeling would be that they're basically aimed at the People's Liberation Army, and that's the fuel they would need to invade Taiwan, for example. But I think that China will certainly make its displeasure known about the situation in Iran, and it needs to start getting the oil out. So it's going to be a hot topic for discussion, I'd say.
OK, we've got live arrival pictures now to this welcoming banquet. Could you tell us a bit more about the banquet, where it is, the importance of these locations?
Well, the location it's the Great Hall of the People, which was built in 1959. It was completed in 1959, 10 years after the foundation of the People's Republic of China. It's a hugely important symbol in China. It's right beside the Forbidden City, and it's on Tiananmen Square, which was famous, obviously, for the crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators in 1989. But it's also it's right in that this vast concourse in the middle of Beijing, and there's a real sense of place there. It's enormous, and so when the leaders arrive, they're even the most powerful leaders in the world are dwarfed by this huge concourse. It's really, really big, and so it's also a sign of it's being pushed as a sign that China's arrival, China's emergence on the world stage now as a full superpower. So it's a very, very important symbolism in these areas.
One user wrote, Elon is there for Elon. He's not there for America, for American anything. He's building a semiconductor plant. Another writes she is probably excited that Elon is going to take on some of the chip production soon. I mean, they've all got big orders to fill, don't they, when it comes to AI, which is such a huge emerging technology. And you've now got, suddenly out of nowhere, a global demand for it, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, AI is the hot topic of this visit as well, in an economic sense. Obviously, closer trade ties are very important, but it's AI ties. China wants the AI tech. It also ties into the Taiwan connection because so much of the AI chips come from Taiwan. Maybe we can talk to Rick about that. I mean, Rick, maybe you could tell us a bit about the semiconductor industry and just how important it is in these talks.
Yeah, well, that's kind of this complicated triangle between the three. You see Jensen Huang there from NVIDIA, you know, the designer of the most sophisticated chips, some of these chips that are used in AI, but most of them are made by TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And I think that's really showing how interlinked all of these economies and issues are in a way they just weren't decades ago. So just in the way that the US and China are kind of slowly picking apart their codependencies, they've got those strangleholds on each other, which they pulled out during the trade war last year. You know, from the US side, they put in those export controls to keep China off the really sophisticated tech, the high-end, the most sophisticated chips, and also the manufacturing process to make them. At the same time, China's using those rare earths, which it controls. And how does Taiwan fit in? Well, you know, Taiwan is making all of these chips and sending them out all around the world. And that's something that just keeps getting bigger and bigger for Taiwan. It's working with other countries, building fabs, chip fabrication in other parts of the world. But still, the most sophisticated and most important chips are made here in Taiwan, and then they're shipped out to the rest of the world. So another kind of narrative coming out of Taiwan and other policymakers around the world is just how important Taiwan, the Taiwan Strait is. We've seen what a war in the Middle East and the Hormuz Strait being disrupted does to the global economy. And there's many people that said that it would be multitude times worse if something happened here in the Taiwan Strait, with Taiwan so crucial to those really high-end digital technology supply chains.
One user is asking, what about asking China to help open the Strait of Hormuz, Clifford?
Well, I think China views this very much as the US's problem, and so I don't think it would get involved in. China doesn't really traditionally get involved in these sort of situations. It's always it will criticize what the US is doing, but beyond that, it won't really get involved.
And while we look at these different CEOs, we saw Tim Cook before, as well as Elon and the NVIDIA boss. How much do summits like these benefit or affect the global free market, one user's asking?
Well, the free market is a big word. This is very much, these are massive tech bros,
yeah,
and they're kind of dividing things up among themselves. That's what it looks like with the permission of the.
They're already
US president.
and they're already massive.
Yeah.
Why then is the outgoing Apple boss there? I mean, surely that would cause some sort of business friction, wouldn't it, when it comes to Apple and the Asian competitors?
Apple has been incredibly good at avoiding a lot of the problems of the trade war. It's been. Cook clearly has this incredible relationship within China. They clearly have amazing relationships within the Chinese government, and they're also very good at dealing with the US government. He's been very effective with Trump. So I think that Apple is a very unusual company that way. You would think that it would cause more friction, but another thing that's important is that he will be there to reassure the Chinese that his successor will not be will presumably carry along the same policies that's been going on.
Okay. We're still waiting for Trump to arrive at the banquet. But in the meantime, Rick, if I can pull you in again, the two Koreas are something that have come up in discussions on this trip, apart from Iran, Ukraine, and all the other problems we have in the world. And it's interesting that both the US and China sit again, on opposite sides on this.
Yeah, North Korea, of course, what China's biggest, most intimate ally. We see Kim Jong-un visiting Beijing fairly regularly, and Chinese officials have been in North Korea quite recently as well. We know from the Chinese handout that the North Korean, I think that the Korean Peninsula was how they put it, came up in talks. That's obviously, on the north side, a big ally of the Chinese, and South Korea, backed by the US with a lot of tens of thousands of US soldiers there. And obviously, again, both countries have have stakes in that game, and they want there to be peace and stability, that status quo existing there as well. One thing that's often bandied around is how China can facilitate, or what role China plays in arranging the meetings between North Korea and the US, and whether this would signal kind of another Trump and Kim meeting. I think some officials in South Korea were asked about that today, and they said that they didn't see any signs of a meeting between Trump and Kim coming in the near future.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting. One viewer has written, does anyone believe that these Americans are making sure that they're following security protocols? We were talking about the protocols around President Xi earlier, but are these American cell phones secure? Good question. Maybe we could ask Tim Cook that if we had him. Another user writes, the US has no time for R&D, taking China's. The US is stealing Chinese technology. Okay, we've had the debate for years about China stealing tech from the US. Is it now going in the other direction?
I don't think it's stealing Chinese technology to the same extent as things are going the other way. But what is certainly true is, in some ways, we're kind of moving away from that aspect of the story. I mean, now China is achieving tech dominance with its domestic companies, and that's really what counts, because the story of who invents it only matters for so long. Ultimately, it just means now that Chinese EVs are proving themselves to be better and cheaper because of the massive state support and the fact that they have this incredible industrial policy and an industrial powerhouse. So what you're seeing is that in some ways we're kind of moving beyond the theft of IP into a whole new era of Chinese tech probable dominance.
Another viewer asks, wouldn't we achieve more if these meetings and banquets would be held in the poorest regions of the world? Another good point. The US has a 40-hour work week, another viewer writes, with 2 weeks vacation. France, 35 hours. How long is the working week in China, Clifford?
Well, the working week in China is very long. It's there's a lot of things. There's a lot of talk at the moment about, it's that you work from 6 in the morning to 7 in the evening, 7 days a week,
and expected to entertain guests long into the night.
Yeah. So it's the working. I mean, in some ways, because the Chinese Communist Party controls the narrative coming out of China, and because there's very few foreign journalists there now, we're being fed this diet that China is doing wonderfully well. But the Chinese economy, there are challenges. The Chinese economy is struggling because the domestic economy is in trouble. There's growing youth unemployment. It does face challenges. I mean, it's obviously the economy is performing very well.
But debt is still a huge problem,
isn't it? Yeah, debt
is
a huge issue, and this whole tech aspect is Xi Jinping sees tech as the way to boost the economy. Mm-hmm. So they are throwing everything at this now, and so that's a big point.
And hence why all these tech CEOs have been invited along. It looks like the top officials are almost there at the banquet. We've got a lot of clapping and movement. There's Trump, there's Xi. So she offers Trump a seat at the table. Glorious music being played there. What do you think about the choice? It sounded like something from Dallas.
Yeah, it does actually look a bit like South Fork. They sat down the way they sat down exactly at the same time. They're now looking at each other. I wonder what Trump is going to eat. I mean, he doesn't have a particularly adventurous palate, right? But
I guess it's not going to be Chinese street food.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's now we wait for the.
So while the two leaders get ready to have their meal.
President Donald J. Trump now begins.
Sorry, we are getting a translation. I just want to listen in a bit. 'The Chinese leader Xi Jinping taking to the stage to make a brief comment to open the welcome banquet.
尊敬的特朗普总统，女士们、先生们，很高兴为特朗普总统对中国进行国事访问举行国宴。首先，我代表中国政府和中国人民，对特朗普总统和美国代表团表示热烈欢迎。
Honorable President Donald J. Trump, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to host this state banquet in honor of President Trump during his state visit to China. On behalf of the Chinese government and people, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to President Trump and the U.S. delegation.
这是一次历史性访问。 今年是中国15开局之年，14亿多中国人民立足于5000多年中华文明深厚基础，正在以高质量发展全面推进中国式现代化。今年也是美国独立250周年，3亿多。 美国人民正在重振爱国、创新、开拓精神，推动美国发展迈向新的征程。中美两国人民都是伟大的人民。
The last time one of the last times he met Putin, he said we are creating something here, the likes of which has not been seen in 100 years. So that's a really close alliance and very interesting.
造福世界。
This is a historic visit. This year marks the start of China's 15th five-year plan for economic and social development. The over 1.4 billion people of China, drawing on the rich heritage of our over 5,000-year civilization, are advancing Chinese modernization on all fronts through high-quality development. This year is also the 250th anniversary of American independence. The over 300 million American people are reinvigorating the spirit of patriotism, innovation, and enterprise, and ushering in a new journey for the development of the United States. The people of China and the United States are both great peoples. Achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation and making America great again can go hand in hand. We can help each other succeed and advance the well-being of the whole world.
55年前
The whole world, that's interesting.
Yeah.
尼克松总统派基
The
辛格
great
博士访
rejuvenation
华，
and make America great again. These are the
中美
two
开展
central sort
乒乓
of
外
principles
交
that they're both pushing the whole time.
双方官民并举，推开了中美冰封20多年的大门，成为当代国际关系史上重大事件。 此
I mean, the
后，
focus of the speech is very much
中美之
how
间
much
以
they have
很
in
多
common.
开放合作的故事，不断书写着友谊的佳话。新形势下，我同特朗普总统顺应两国人民和国际社会期待，通过多次会晤和通话，推动中美关系保持总体稳定。
55 years ago, President Richard Nixon sent Dr. Henry Kissinger to visit China, and ping-pong diplomacy was carried out between our two countries. Through efforts of the two governments and peoples, the door that had remained frozen for over 20 years was opened, marking a milestone in contemporary international relations. From then on, China and the United States have written many chapters of friendship through mutual openness and cooperation. Under the new situation, President Trump and I, fully aware of the expectations of our two nations and the international community, have had multiple meetings and phone calls and kept China-US relations generally stable.
今天，我同特朗普总统就中美关系和国际及地区形势深入交换意见。我们一致认为，中美关系是当今世界最重要的双边关系，只能搞好，不能搞坏。两国合则两利，斗则俱伤，应该成为伙伴而不是对手。我们同意构建中美建设性战略稳定关系，推动中美关系
Does he
稳
always read
定、
his speeches?
健康、
Yep.
可持续发展，为世界带来更多和平、繁荣、进步。
Today, President Trump and I had in-depth exchanges on China-US relations and international and regional dynamics. We both believe that the China-US relationship is the most important bilateral relationship in the world. We must make it work and never mess it up. Both China and the United States stand to gain from cooperation and lose from confrontation. Our two countries should be partners rather than rivals. President Trump and I also agreed to build a constructive China-US relationship of strategic stability to promote the steady, sound, and sustainable development of China-US relations and bring more peace, prosperity, and progress to the world.
尊敬的特朗普总统先生、女士们、先生们、朋友们，纵观中美关系发展历程，能不能做到相互尊重、和平共处、合作共赢，是中美关系能否稳定发展的关键所在。当今世界变乱交织，中美关系承载着两国17亿多人民的福祉，关乎世界80多亿人民的利益。我们应当共同扛起这个历史重任，推动中美关系这艘巨轮沿着正确的航道平稳前行。
Honorable President Donald J. Trump, ladies and gentlemen, friends, looking back at the course of China-US relations, whether or not we could have mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation is the key to whether the relationship can advance steadily. The world today is changing and turbulent. China-US relations concern the well-being of the over 1.7 billion people of both countries and affect the interests of the over 8 billion people of the world. Both sides should rise up to this historic responsibility and steer the giant ship of China-US relations forward, steadily and in the right direction.
最后，我提议为中美两国发展繁荣和人民幸福，为中美关系的美好未来和两国人民的友谊， 为特朗普总统以及在座的各位朋友的健康
It's just so predictable and
干
such
杯
a contrast to Trump's speeches.
Now,
You just don't
please
know where they're
join
going
me
to
in a toast to the development and prosperity of China and the United States and the well-being of our people, to the bright future of China-US relations and the friendship between the two peoples, and to the health of President Trump and all the friends present. Cheers.
干杯！
Cheers.
So Chinese leader Xi Jinping there welcoming the guests, and it looks like Trump is also going to have something to say, unless he's just giving Xi a standing applause.
Thought he was reaching for a hug there. But
No, there's
whispering in his ear.
No hug.
Yeah.
So this next speech could go on a little longer.
谢谢习近平主席。
Thank you, President Xi.
现在请特朗普总统致辞。
Next, a toast by President Trump.
Unless he's hungry, of course. But again, it depends what's on the menu.
Well, thank you very much. This is a great honor. It was a fantastic day. And in particular, I want to thank President Xi, my friend, for this magnificent welcome. And it really was a magnificent welcome like none other. And for so graciously hosting us on this very historic state visit. We had extremely positive and productive conversations and meetings today with the Chinese delegation earlier. And this evening is another cherished opportunity to discuss among friends some of the things that we discussed today, all good for the United States and for China. And it was a great honor to be with you. Please.
感谢习近平主席。今天我们度过了非常美好的一天。首先要感谢习近平主席这一盛大的欢迎，那么也非常感谢在这一次历史性的国事访问当中非常慷慨地接待了我的代表团。那么今天早些时候，我们跟中方进行了富有成效以及具有建设性的对话。那今天晚上将是我们另外的一次机会，能够共同再次讨论我们今天早些时候已经讨论到的一些问题，以及我们的共同利益，以及我们如何能够为全人类塑造更好、更安全的未来。
The relationship between the American and Chinese people goes all the way back to America's founding. The first American consul to China, Samuel Shaw, arrived on the first American trading ship to reach these shores in 1784. The Chinese merchants had a name for the Americans. They called their visions the New People. 2.5 centuries later, that first connection has grown into one of the most consequential relationships in world history.
美国人民和中国人民之间的友谊可以追溯到美国的建国之初。那么，美国的第一任驻华大使萨缪尔·肖先生，在1784年乘坐第一艘美国的商船到达了中国的沿岸。当时中国的商人是这样称呼到来的美国访客，他们将当时到来的美国访客称为一个崭新的民族。250年后的今天，这一个当初的友谊已经慢慢的演变成为当今世界当中最举足轻重的关系之一。
From the beginning, our citizens have shared a deep sense of mutual respect. Founding Father Benjamin Franklin published the sayings of Confucius in his colonial newspaper, and today's sculpture, recognizing that ancient Chinese sage, is carved into the face of the United States Supreme Court very proudly.
从一开始，我们两国之间的人民就已经有深厚的相互的尊重。 美国的国父本杰明·富兰克林曾经在他的殖民报纸当中刊登了孔子的《论语》，而今天在美国最高法院建筑物的门前，可以说有一个雕刻，这个雕刻就是为了向中国的这一名古代的圣人进行致敬。
The appreciation ran in both directions. Chinese admirers of President George Washington gifted a stone tablet honoring his memory to adorn the Washington Monument. It bears the words of a Chinese official who called the great general and statesman a hero among men.
这一种欣赏是相互的。那么，许多中国人非常崇敬乔治·华盛顿总统。那么，这些人当时就向美国捐赠了一个石碑，就是为了纪念华盛顿总统。目前，这个石碑已经镶嵌在华盛顿纪念碑里面。石碑上刻有当时的一名中国官员形容这一名伟大的将军和政治家，他们把他称为“人中豪杰”。
And across the centuries, this mutual esteem grew into a relationship that reflected the tremendous talent and potential of our two people. Chinese workers helped lay the railroad tracks that connected our Atlantic coast to the Pacific. American travelers to China helped spread literacy and modern medicine. And at the request of China's ambassador, it was President Theodore Roosevelt who provided the funds to establish President Xi's alma mater, Tsinghua University.
在过去几百年当中，这种相互的尊敬已经成为了一段全新的关系。这段关系可以说反映出我们两国人民之间巨大的潜力，以及我们的努力和智慧。中国工人当初帮助美国建设了我们的铁路路轨，连通了美国的大西岸和太平洋沿海地区。美国当时早期出访中国的美国人也帮助中国提升了识字率，并且引入了现代医学，并且应时任中国驻华大使的请求，罗斯福总统也专门提供了资金，成立了习主席的母校清华大学。
As allies in World War II, President Franklin Roosevelt's mentions of the brave people of China, that's what they were, drew loud cheers in his speeches in the United States, and everybody loved what he had to say, just as many Chinese now love basketball and blue jeans. Chinese restaurants in America today outnumber the 5 largest fast food chains in the United States, all combined. That's a pretty big statement.
那么，作为二战期间的盟国，罗斯福总统在美国的多次演讲当中提到了勇敢的中国人民。正如当前许多中国人非常喜欢篮球和穿蓝色的牛仔裤，在美国目前的中餐厅的数量要比美国前5大快餐连锁店的总的店面还要多。
This bond of commerce and respect that stretches back 250 years is the foundation for a future that benefits both of our nations. The American and Chinese people share much in common. We value hard work, we value courage and achievement, we love our families, and we love our countries. Together we have the chance to draw on these values to create a future of greater prosperity, cooperation, and happiness, and peace for our children. We love our children. This region and the world is a special world with the two of us united and together.
那么，至于商业当中的纽带以及我们的相互尊重，可以说追溯到250年前，是我们将要构建的未来的基础。至于未来将会惠及我们两国的人民，美国人民和中国人民有许多的共同点，我们都崇尚劳动。我们都崇尚勇气和成就，我们都非常爱我们的家庭，我们也爱我们的国家。我们两国一道，我们将有机会基于我们共同的价值观，创造出一个更加繁荣、基于合作、幸福、和平的未来。 为我们的子孙、为本地区以及全世界造福。
Thank you again, President Xi, for this beautiful welcome. And tonight it is my honor to extend an invitation to you and Madam Peng to visit us at the White House this September 24th. And we look forward to it. And I'd now like to raise a glass and propose a toast to the rich and enduring ties between the American and Chinese people. It's a very special relationship. And I want to thank you again. This has been an amazing period of time. Thank you, President Xi.
那么再一次感谢习主席，
US
感谢
President
这一
Donald Trump
美好的欢迎。那
posing
么
a
今天晚
toast.
上，我也想借此机会
Let me just
向您
get some comments
以及
from Rick
彭女
and
士提出邀
and
请，
Clifford before
于
we
9月
leave you.
24
We'll
号
keep
邀
this
请你
live
们
stream
出
going for
访
another few
白宫
minutes.
那我也希望
What did you think?
针
What
对
was
中
your
美国人
impression
民
there
和
of
中国人民之
Xi's
间
and
深
Trump's
厚的
speech?
以及
Yeah, I think
持
like a
久的
lot
友
of
谊
the
我提议
a lot of this
我们
visit
进
is
行
about
准备
treading water, about
那么
not
我
you know
们
not
这
trying to
两国
rock the
关
boat.
系是非常深刻的
I think they're
关系
thinking Trump is thinking ahead to when she comes to Washington in terms of any big moves. I think what they're trying to do is just kind of keep a lid on things, give better optics to the U.S.-China relationship. They both stressed what the two countries had in common rather than what divides them, and they steered clear of any mention of anything controversial. So I felt that they were fairly, in some ways, quite calm speeches aimed at showing that they're talking but not wanting to reveal anything.
One user writes, amazing second chance for better relations in that part of the world. Like it or not, China is the superpower of the future. Another writes, be friends, work together, please, and stop being such despots, the lot of you. And another user writes, it's all about rare earth minerals and tariffs. That's why big tech is there. Rick, could you give us your closing comments on this big visit and such a high stakes one between the two world's superpowers and biggest economies in the world?
Yeah, I think we saw some of the differences in those two speeches there, which really sum up the challenges of these two really big leaders of those huge countries. Xi Jinping was really laying out what he saw as a new framework for relations with the US. He talked a lot about, these big concepts of mutual coexistence, win-win, and about peace. And we saw that Trump, used his own way, and a bit how we saw speeches earlier on in the day, much more off the cuff, talking about kind of more everyday values. But in the end, you could see that there is kind of some sort of bonhomie between them, and that's, as Clifford was saying, that's what's important here. A lot of the stakes of this relationship, the stakes of this trip and the relationship in general is that it has to keep going, and that there has to be communication, and that it can't turn into another tit-for-tat trade war or as they've been talking about, something worse.
And as Xi underlined there, never mess it up when he's talking about the relationship between the two superpowers. And as the leaders met, we saw a surge in US trading due to AI hopes, investors looking for updates on China's imports of advanced NVIDIA chips. We also got wires through from Reuters saying that US Treasury Bessent expects large Boeing orders during this Chinese visit. He's expecting an announcement during President Trump's visit. And when it comes to Asian markets, I think this was more telling. They were really mixed. I mean, traders just don't know where we're headed on all of these topics that we've been talking about here today. Ukraine, Iran, the two Koreas, trade, tech, and then just the relationship between the US and China themselves. So it's certainly quite an awkward and strange summit that we've been watching here with you. At the same time, the two leaders of these two countries wanting to say that it's all very positive. Strategic stability was one of the buzz terms. But we'll see how both sides figure this out. What do you think? And where are we headed? Let us know in the comments. I'm Ben Fazulin. I'll see you again very soon here on DW.